Hello everyone and welcome back for another Hour of Devastation limited review video. I'm Nitsa and I'm in the midst of a 6-part series wherein I will talk about all 199 cards in Amonkhet. So far I've covered white and blue, and today I will continue with black. Before we get into talking about the cards, I want to give you a quick reminder on how I grade the cards in these videos. Just like with Amonkhet, I'm using letter grades to help me to explain how good I think these cards will be in the new format, and I will provide a letter grade for every card after discussing each of them. These grades are an easy way of summing up what I have to say about the card and have to do with how highly I can see myself taking them. To help convey what each of these grades mean, I'm going to provide examples of cards from Amonkhet that I think deserve each of these letter grades. Let's start with A. Cards that are in A are bombs, an incredibly efficient removal, and are the kind of cards that you want to be first picking or are so powerful that they pull you into their color. There are not a ton of A's in any format, and I'm pretty stingy with them. There are the best cards in the set, and the vast majority of them are mythic or rare, though occasionally uncommons make it into the A range. Some examples of A's from Amonkhet are cards like Angel of Sanctions and Glorybringer. These two cards are insane and so powerful that they can win games on their own, both providing large flying bodies and the ability to remove other creatures, making them very powerful. Next, let's look at B's. These cards are obviously not quite as good as A's, but are still very good and are, in cases where there isn't a huge A-level bomb in the pack, still cards I'm happy to take with a first pick or an early pick. These are very good removal spells and very efficient creatures with powerful abilities. They aren't quite as game or draft warping as A's are, but seeing them past pick 4 or 5 is a pretty good signal that a color is open and for you to jump into it. Most B's are of uncommon rarity or higher, though occasionally commons can make it into the B range as well. Some examples of B's from Amonkhet are Oncrop Crasher and Angler Drake. These cards are very powerful and can help shift the game in your favor and are good at any stage of the game, but they aren't cards that completely warp a game when they are played, like, let's say, Angel of Sanctions or Glorybringer. Still, both of these cards are cards I'm happy to first pick and ecstatic to get any later than that. Next, we have C's. This is what the vast majority of cards in a set are, and they appear at every rarity with regularity. Solid and playable cards that you neither feel good or bad about having in your deck is sort of the definition of a C. These are decent creatures like 2-mana 2/2s with some small upside and solid removal. Some examples of C's from Amonkhet are cards like Colossopede, just a 5-mana 5/5, sure, it's fine, and Cursed Minotaur, a 3-mana 3/2 with Menace. These are both cards that you feel fine about having in your deck, but you don't exactly feel excited about. From there, we move to D's. These are cards that are playable, but just barely, and are cards that you generally aren't happy to have in your deck. They usually only end up there when something went wrong in your draft, like being unsure about what colors you should be in so you don't end up with enough playables, and thus you're forced into playing cards of this level. There were actually a lot of D's in Amonkhet because cycling made what would otherwise be F's into D's. Some examples of D's are Violent Impact and Watchers of the Dead. Neither of them really does enough to be card you're excited about having in your deck. Watchers of the Dead is a 2-mana 2/2 with no real upside, and Violent Impact is a bad artifact removal spell that happens to have cycling. You'll play them when you have to, but you don't really want to. Finally, we have F's. These are cards that I think you should never ever put into your deck and are terrible. Just like there aren't many A's in this set, there usually aren't many F's, but they are always around. Weirdly, there are actually a decent number of rares and mythics in this category, since they often like printing unique and strange effects on cards of that rarity. Some examples of S from Amonkhet are Glorious End, just is a terrible card. Any card that says you lose the game on it is probably not something you want to play. You had to end up in a very narrow situation for it to actually work. You had to cast it on your opponent's turn and be able to kill them on your next turn, otherwise you just lose. And Hazaret's Monument just basically does nothing. You don't really want to be playing the card. It doesn't have a big enough impact on the game. It's not worth the card in general. In addition to these more clear-cut grades, there are also two categories of cards that I will present more than one grade for. The first of these are sideboard cards. These are cards that generally you don't want to have in your main board. They're either a D or an F if they're in your main board, but they are better in certain matchups out of your sideboard. An example of this from Amonkhet is Stinging Shot. It is a D in your main board, since it will frequently never have a target and just get cycled, but out of your sideboard, it gets all the way into the B range because it's incredibly efficient removal for dealing with flyers. The other cards I will present two grades for are build-around cards. These are cards that are generally a D or an F in your average limited deck, but if you manage to get enough synergies, they become much better. An example of this from Amonkhet would be Nest of Scarabs, an unplayable card in basically any limited deck, but if you end up with 10 or more ways to make -1/-1 counters, it moves all the way into the C+ and B- range. One last thing before getting into the actual discussion of the cards is a few caveats. These grades are all based on my first impressions of the cards, and obviously I haven't had a chance to play with any of them since this set was just spoiled. These impressions are based on years of playing Magic and drafting a lot, and it is likely, and probably even definite, that there's going to be cards that I get wrong. With Amonkhet, I went back and provided new grades for about 10% of the cards a few weeks after my initial limited review, and I had a chance to play with the cards. And I think that's about right. I think getting 10% wrong is something that I feel good about. I think that's a decent job on a limited review. No one can perfectly predict how a limited format will play out. You have to play it to get the best understanding. Still, this is where these cards stand for me at the moment, and over time I'll provide you with new grades for cards that either go up and down for me. Now, let's get started. Our first card is Accursed Horde, which for 3 generic and a black is a 3/3 zombie, uncommon, and it says for 1 generic and 1 black, target attacking zombie gains indestructible until end of turn. This is a 4-mana 3/3, which is not something I'm generally happy to play, but it comes with the ability to make any attacking zombie, including itself, indestructible, and that pushes Accursed Horde into definitely being a solid playable. Only being able to make creatures indestructible if they're attacking is a big limitation. It can't save creatures from removal that is played outside of combat, and it can't save blocking creatures. But Black-White Zombies has been a deck about turning your creatures sideways anyway, so Accursed Horde is a good playable. It's going to be a C in your average black deck. Even just on its own, having a creature that's indestructible when it attacks, or at least can be, is nice. But it probably gets into the C+ range if you're in a heavy zombie deck. Next we have Banewit Eternal, which for 2 generic and 1 black is a 5/5 zombie crocodile demon. How's that for a creature type? And it is rare. It has Afflict 3, and Afflict is a mechanic in this set that has a numerical value assigned to it, and what it means is whenever that creature is blocked, the defending player loses that much life, in this case 3. It also has, whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a -1/-1 counter on Banewit Eternal, and it has, whenever Banewit Eternal deals combat damage to a player, remove all -1/-1 counters from it. This thing is a 3-mana 5/5 with Afflict 3. That is a huge creature and one with a lot of upside. Now, chances are, after you play it, your opponent is going to cast at least 1 spell on their turn, so you will usually have this as a 3-mana 4/4 on your turn, but then this can become a real problem. Even if your opponent wants to chump block it so that it doesn't grow back to 5/5, the Afflict mechanic will damage them. This is a great creature in an aggressive deck, and a very interesting way to use the Afflict mechanic. A very cool design, as it makes the opponent make decisions that aren't always easy to make, and neither of them seem very appealing. This gets all the way up to a B for me. It'll be first pickable in most packs, and the kind of black creature any aggressive black deck will want, and even non-aggressive black decks would be happy to play. Next we have Apocalypse Demon, which for 4 generic and 2 black is a star creature demon at rare with flying, and it says Apocalypse Demon's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. It also says at the beginning of your upkeep, tap Apocalypse Demon unless you sacrifice another creature. This thing can be absolutely huge, there's no question about that, especially in a format with cycling. But this demon asks a ton of you. First, he costs 6 mana, so you're expecting some pretty good stats to make it worth it. Probably at least a 5/5. Second, he eats one of your creatures every upkeep, or he tapped himself down. Yes, there's some synergy there. The creature he eats will make him bigger because it'll go to your graveyard, and this means that this demon asks you to both have a large graveyard and have a board presence adequate enough for him to gorge on for him to actually be useful. These two requirements, which are by no means guaranteed, make it difficult for this card to be thought of as a bomb in all situations. There will certainly be games where he functions as one, but there will be more games when he just doesn't do enough for everything he asks of you. I'm going to give him a C as a reflection of how inconsistent he's going to be, and I wouldn't really recommend first picking him, but he's got a pretty high ceiling. If you see him around the middle of a pack, I would feel pretty happy about taking him and seeing if I can make it work. Next, we have Banewit Punisher, which for 2 generic and a black is a 2/2 human warrior at uncommon, and it says when Banewit Punisher enters the battlefield, you may put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. And it has 1 black, sacrifice Banewit Punisher, destroy target creature that has a -1/-1 counter on it. This is an incredibly good card. You can look at it a couple of ways. It can basically be a 4-mana destroy target creature, which is pretty nice. Or if your deck is very -1/-1 counter heavy anyway, you can use the -1/-1 counter to kill an X1, and then use the Punisher's second effect to kill another creature. Obviously that's sort of magical Christmas land, but it'll happen. Both paths are awesome, and this basically amounts to a 2/2 creature, who is also a kill spell when you need it to be. This is one of the best uncommons in the set, and you should take it early. I'm going to give it a B+. Next we have Bontu's Last Reckoning, which for 1 generic and 2 black is a sorcery that says, destroy all creatures. Also says, land you control don't untap during your next untap step. I'm going to be honest here. This may be the hardest card to evaluate for limited in the entire set. I think all of this cycle are kind of hard to evaluate without playing with them because we've never seen something quite like them. So if I'm going to be wrong about a card, this will probably be one of them. A 3-mana board sweeper is incredibly powerful, but the downside on this card is huge. Not untapping lands is brutal, and in many situations will just lead to you time-walking yourself. It's a 3-mana board sweeper, and that's great, but is that worth basically saying skip your next turn on some cases? I think it is, but that downside sort of pigeonholes it into specific scenarios. Playing this and then casting a creature can help mitigate the fact that your land's dead on tap, as can just casting this and leaving some mana untapped for your next turn, but all of that effectively makes this a 6 or 7 mana board sweeper, not a 3 mana one. Overall, this card is good, but because of the hoops you have to jump through to make it work, I just can't see myself being super pumped about first picking it. But I do think it gets into the lower B range. It's just so powerful. Board sweepers are great. It's easy to just blow your opponent out with them, even if you're not untapping your lands. And Bantu's Last Reckoning is going to be worth first picking in most packs, I think. But again, this is a card that I find difficult to evaluate and I look forward to playing with. Next, we have Carns Creature, which for 3 generic and a black is a 3/1 zombie bird with flying. A 4-mana 3/1 flyer usually isn't bad and can really do some damage in the air in a hurry, and in other formats 4-mana 3/1s have been worthy of Cs. I don't think that's true in this one though, despite having the useful zombie creature type. There are too many -1/-1 counters running around here for this guy to be worth playing most of the time, though it is worth noting, again, that it has a zombie creature type. You'll play this card only if your draft went wrong and you need some more playables, or if you have the most insane number of zombie synergies ever, so I'm going to give it a D+. Next, we have Downfall. This is a sorcery for 2 generic and a black at uncommon, and it says choose one. Target opponent exiles a creature he or she controls, and the other option is target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it, exile that card. This is sort of an interesting card. We've never really seen an effect exactly like this. The first part is sort of an edict effect, which is something that makes your opponent sacrifice a creature, but you're actually making them exile the creature instead of making them sacrifice it. It has the flexibility to also turn into coercion, which is a discard spell when you need it to. Neither of these effects is great for 3 mana at sorcery speed. Letting your opponent choose their worst creature is always annoying, and yes, Doomfall will usually be nice in turn 3 when you're probably just taking down your opponent's only creature, but its value will diminish as the game goes on and your opponent's board grows wider. That's part of the reason they added the discard effect to it, so it could be useful at all stages of the game, but still, both halves of this card are kind of underwhelming. The exile half would be like a D+, and the discard half a solid D. So what you're really paying for here is flexibility. That flexibility is enough to get this into the C range for me, but it isn't a black card I'll be taking super highly. Next, we have Dreamstealer, which for 2 generic and a black is a 1/2 human wizard at rare with menace, and it says, whenever Dreamstealer deals combat damage to a player, that player discards that many cards. And it has Eternalize. This is the mechanic that lets you pay a cost and brings your creature back from the graveyard as a creature token, and it is a 4/4 in addition to all of its other effects. So it comes back as a 4/4, which means that if it hits your opponent, they'll have to discard 4 cards. This card, like most of the cards with Eternalize, has a pretty cool design. A 3-mana 1/2 with Menace, who makes your opponent discard a card when it hits them, isn't a terrible card on its own, though it certainly isn't an exciting one either, probably something like a D. Adding Eternalize, even at 6 mana, is good. It allows us to make an impact in the early and the late game, since a 4/4 Menace that makes your opponent basically discard their hand is the real deal in the late game. Still, the mediocrity of this card before it eternalizes makes it hard for me to give it more than a C+. I wouldn't take it ultra early, but I think I'd be happy to have it in most black decks. Next, we have Grisly Survivor, which for 2 generic and a black is a 2/3 Minotaur Warrior at common, and it says whenever you cycle or discard a card, Grisly Survivor gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Grisly Survivor gives cycling decks another mediocre payoff. A 3-mana 2/3 with a little bit of upside, in that he can boost himself up to a 4/3, and I guess in some situations you could surprise your opponent and pump him even more than that. But this Survivor isn't anything exciting, just sort of a filler card for black decks with cycling in them. This is because he can't really pump his toughness and sort of dominate combat or something like that. If your opponent's blocking it with a 3-power creature, it's just going to die. And because of that, it's just sort of filler. It's not an incredible payoff. It's a fine one. I mean, you can attack with it and threaten to pump it, and that can sometimes be useful. But it's basically just filler for decks with cycling in them, and that, for me, is a textbook C. Next, we have Hour of Glory, which for 3 generic and a black is an instant at rare, and it says exile target creature. If that creature was a god, its controller reveals his or her hand and exiles all cards from it with the same name as that creature. This card gets my vote for one of the cards that people will overrate in this format because of its rarity. This really isn't that much better than Final Reward, which is a removal spell that proved to be a little clunky, though it does get the job done. It basically costs 1 less than final reward. The god part of the card is basically never going to come up in limited. Even if you manage to exile a god, your opponent almost definitely doesn't have another god in their hand. And if they do, then you're going to feel pretty awesome. Don't let the rarity on this fool you into thinking it's better than it is. That said, this is a good removal spell, and any black deck will play it, and it's a good way to start a draft. It makes creatures with graveyard shenanigans really sad, and exiling is relevant, and I think it's worthy of making it into the B range, which means it's first pickable, and it's probably premium removal. It might be a little bit off from being premium removal because it's a little bit clunky, but it's pretty close, and a B is a pretty good place to be. First picking this card isn't something I'd be sad to do at all. Next, we have Kendra Eternal, which for 1 generic and 1 black is a 2/2 zombie jackal warrior with Afflict 1. A 2-mana 2/2 is nothing special these days. It is almost just what we expect. This one comes with 2 bits of upside. The first being the Affliction mechanic, which means that even if your opponent trades with this, they'll take 1 damage. It also means blocking it with a 1/3 or chump blocking it isn't really worth it. The fact that this jackal is also a zombie is relevant since one of the color pairs in this format, black and white, loves zombies. I'm going to give this a C. It's a solid 2-drop that I feel fine about playing in any black deck, but it is certainly nothing special. Next, we have Lethal Sting, which for 2 generic and a black is a sorcery, and it says, as an additional cost to cast Lethal Sting, put a -1/-1 counter on a creature you control. And it also says, destroy target creature. This gets my vote for best common in the set at this point. Yes, it is a removal spell that is only sorcery speed, and it makes you put a -1/-1 counter on one of your creatures, but 3 mana to kill any creature is a way better deal than we get these days at the common rarity. Some decks can even take advantage of the -1/-1 counter downside, making this card truly ridiculous in those situations. The biggest problem this card has is if you have 0 creatures in play, you can't play it since you have nowhere to put the -1/-1 counter, but in most cases, that's not what the board's going to look like. This is premium, first pickable removal, and I'm going to give it a B. Next, we have Lilianas Defeat. 1 black mana as a sorcery for an uncommon, and it says destroy target black creature or black planeswalker. If that permanent was a Liliana planeswalker, her controller loses 3 life. Liliana's Defeat is the best card of this cycle we've seen so far this week, but like the others, it is an F in your main board. However, against an opponent playing black, it moves all the way up into the A range. It provides insane value and basically always allow you to trade up since it only costs a single black mana and can kill any black creature, no questions asked. If you're playing black, picking this up in the middle of a pack isn't a bad idea since it will be so powerful against some of your opponents. The reason it gets an F though is because there's no guarantee you're going to be playing against people playing black, and then it's literally just a blank card in your deck. Well, I guess not literally, figuratively a blank card in your deck because it won't have any targets. It is worth noting that you actually can kill a Liliana Planeswalker in this format, so that upside will occasionally be relevant, but most of the time it's just going to be killing black creatures for 1 mana, which, again, is awesome. It's a great sideboard card, very high-quality sideboard card, worth taking relatively early as far as sideboard cards go because it's just that good. Next, we have Lurching Rot Beast, which is 3 generic mana and 1 black mana for a 4/2 zombie beast with cycling, and it's 1 black mana to cycle it. 4 mana for a 4/2 isn't good, but it does come with the zombie creature type as well as cycling in this case. The cycling is nice because it will certainly be board states where a 4/2 does you no good, so you can try to dig for something a little more impactful. The zombie creature type gives it synergy, especially within the black-white color pair, while cycling also has several payoffs in the format. Still, it really doesn't do anything special. It's sort of just another card that sort of can keep your deck together. It's a filler card, and not much more than that. I'm going to give it a C. Next, we have Marauding Bone Slasher, which for 2 generic and a black is a 3/3 zombie minotaur at common, and it says Marauding Bone Slasher can't block unless you control another zombie. This is another zombie, and it sort of has synergy, I guess, except that synergy is just that it takes away its downside. This won't be able to block if you don't control another zombie, but still, 3 mana 3/3s are hard to come by in Limited, especially at common and especially in black. I think I would play this in any aggressive black deck and be perfectly happy with it, making this a C. There's not much more to say about it. Next, we have Merciless Eternal, 2 generic and a black for a 2/2 zombie cleric at uncommon, and it has Afflict 2, and it has 2 generic and a black. Discard a card. Merciless Eternal gets +2/+2 until end of turn. I'm not very high on this card. I really don't know why they put it at uncommon. I mean, I know not all uncommons can be good, but this just seems really underwhelming to me. 3 mana for a 2/2 is not a very good rate, and while it can be pumped, 3 mana and discarding a card is a pretty big price to pay to get this guy up to a 4/4. Yeah, you can end up pumping him multiple times a turn if you're really getting there, and there are discard synergies around, which make it a little bit better. And Afflict, of course, also makes it better since If they want to kill it in combat at all, they have to take 2 damage, but it doesn't really seem worth it to me. It is a zombie, so that adds a little bit of extra value, but still, I don't see myself playing this card unless the draft didn't go too well, and it doesn't quite even make it into the solid playable range for me, only getting a D+. Next, we have Moaning Wall, which for 2 generic and a black is a 0/5 zombie wall at common with Defender and Cycling 2. 3 mana for a 0/5 Defender is just bad. A creature like this doesn't do well in this format either because of all the exerters who gain evasive abilities or get too big for the wall to stop. Note that this wall is a zombie, so on occasion that will matter. This card would be an F without Cycling. With Cycling, it barely pushes itself into the I guess I'll play it if I have to range, which means it gets a D-. Next, we have Razzie Cats the Foul-Blooded, which is 5 generic and 3 black mana for a legendary demon at Mythic with flying and trample, and pay 2 life, sacrifice another creature, search your library for a card, and put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. This is a huge monster as an 8 mana 8/8 with flying and trample, and he can also tutor for cards, which is pretty powerful. That said, he costs triple black, so he isn't the kind of bomb you can splash, and 8 mana is an enormous amount of mana. He also gets shut down by lots of common removal in the format, so paying 8 mana for this guy and then having him get, like, compulsory rested is going to be something that seems terrible and feels terrible. He just seems too slow in this format. If you actually get 8 mana and you can cast him, that's pretty nice, but it isn't a foregone conclusion that you win the game either because of the fact that he's vulnerable to a ton of removal in this format. I'm going to give him a D. He will only be playable in the grindiest, controlliest of decks, the kind of decks that I like to draft, so hopefully I'll get to play Razzie Cats, but he's not going to be good in your average limited deck. Next, we have Razzie Cats Right, which for 3 generic and 2 black is a sorcery at uncommon, and it says search your library for a card, and put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. It also has cycling for 1 black. We saw in Amonkhet that cards with 1 mana cycling are all basically worth playing. The best cards with cycling are those that can be pitched in the early game when you don't need them, and then do something impactful in the late game. Razzie Cats Ritual falls in line there to some degree, but 5 mana to tutor for a card is pretty steep. We see 4 mana tutors that just aren't playable. However, the fact that it has 1 black cycling makes it something of a split card. If you aren't interested in dumping 5 mana into this to find a specific card, or if you're in the early stage of the game, you can cycle it. This is pretty unexciting on the whole, and it gets a C- for me. It will make the cut sometimes in black decks, but I don't think you're ever happy to play this. Next, we have Ruin Rat, which for 1 generic and 1 black is a 1/1 rat at common with Death Touch, and when Ruin Rat dies, exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. I'm always a pretty big fan of Death Touch 1/1s. Being able to trade with any ground creature is nice. However, the fact that this set is loaded with -1/-1 counters weakens this rat a little bit. It does come with the additional upside of being able to exile a card from your opponent's graveyard, which will ideally be a card with Embalm, Eternalize, or Aftermath. It is still above average filler, as I can't really see myself not playing several of these anytime I'm playing black, and they get passed to me, so I'm going to give it a C+. Next, we have Scourge of Souls, which for 4 generic and a black is a 3/4 horror at common with lifelink. 5 mana for a 3/4 lifelinker just doesn't seem like a great deal, and this isn't even a zombie. Most of these black creatures I can sort of throw that line in, well, at least it's a zombie. Nope, not this one. This is basically your textbook definition of below average filler. You'll only be playing this guy if you're low on playables. He just doesn't keep up with other 5-drops in this set, and I'm going to give him a D+. Next, we have Torment of Hailfire, which is X and 2 black mana for a sorcery that says, repeat the following process X times. You know, it's going to be a weird card already. And it says, each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. This is admittedly another difficult card to evaluate. Generally, giving your opponent decisions like this isn't a good thing, because obviously, they'll just choose what hurts them the least. The thing is, though, even pumping 6 mana into this is some pretty serious action. That means X is 4. In the late game, your opponent isn't usually going to have a ton of cards in hand. They will probably have a decent number of creatures, and if you pay 4 for X there, that's pretty nice, sort of. If your opponent's sitting at 20, they're just going to go to 8 and kill you, most likely. This card is very situational, but I think it has the potential to win some games, since casting it in the late game can be incredibly powerful. It isn't great in the early game, in fact it's just bad, which makes it difficult to think about this as a bomb, even though it can break the game in the later going. I'm going to give it a C+, with the caveat that this is the kind of card that I might have to revisit after actually playing with it, and I could easily see it being either better or worse in my first impression since it's such a weird card. Our next card is Torment of Scarabs, which for 3 generic and a black is an enchantment or a curse with enchant player. And at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, it makes them make the same decision that the last card makes them make. That player loses 3 life unless he or she sacrifices an online permanent or discards a card. So Torment in this set, it means making people make the decision of 3 life, sacrificing a creature, or discarding a card. As a curse, Torment of Scarabs provides a constant effect on your opponent every single upkeep, and this is definitely the kind of thing that would become a problem. Still, giving your opponent 3 different choices is a little bit too much. One of those choices is very likely not to hurt your opponent very much, especially if they just start holding on to extra lands and the like to discard. Over time, this can become a pretty big problem for your opponent, and this is another difficult card to judge, but I'm going to start it out at C+, and not be surprised to see it go one way or another. Next is Torment of Venom, which for 2 generic and 2 black is an instant, and it says, put 3 -1/-1 counters on target creature. Its controller loses 3 life unless he or she sacrifices another non-land permanent or discards a card. Funnily enough, I think the common card in this Torment cycle, sort of cycle, there's only 3 cards at different rarities, but I think the common one is better than the uncommon or rare one, at least in limited. Putting -1/-1 counters on a creature at instant speed, 3 of them for 4 mana, would already be a pretty reasonable card. I'd probably put that at the C range. But it adds that Torment choice at the end, too. And here the card actually does something other than tormenting the opponent. The other 2 literally just torment the opponent. And that's what makes this one good. It actually does something else, destroying an opponent's creature and then making them make this decision. And that's way better than just making them make the decision. This is one of the best black commons in the set and is a solid removal spell that I'm willing to give a B- to. Next we have Vile Manifestation, which for 1 generic and 1 black is a 0/4 horror at uncommon. And it says Vile Manifestation gets +1/+0 for each card with cycling in your graveyard, and it also has cycling too. This is a pretty good payoff for cycling heavy decks, as it can get quite large relatively easily. The fail case is that it is a 2 mana 0/4 with cycling, and that would already probably be a card that saw play sometimes, probably in the D range. But the fact of the matter is that this will regularly be larger than that. That said, if your deck has too little cycling, this card won't be very impressive and won't be worth much more than the D I just mentioned. But if you end up with 10-ish cards with cycling, it's definitely in the C+ range and the kind of card you'll be looking for if you have a lot of cycling. Next, we have Without Weakness, which for 1 generic and 1 black is an instant, and it says, target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn, and it also has cycling too. I hate combat tricks like this one. Why? Because it doesn't actually boost your creature's stats at all. This means that if your opponent chump blocks, there's no reason to use it because you're not gaining trample or doing extra damage, and if your opponent is blocking with a larger creature, the best you can do is cast Without Weakness to save your creature, which isn't really worth it. That means you just went to combat for no reason other than to lose a card in your hand. Stats boosts are nice because they lead to you actually taking down your opponent's bigger blocker, and this isn't going to do that in most situations, or any actually. It can't take down a bigger blocker. It has cycling added to it, and that's what you want to do with it about 80% of the time because the rest of what it does is so mediocre. Also, yes, you can use it as a way to stop your creature from getting killed by a removal spell, and in that case, it's okay. But it almost turns into counter magic in those situations, being utterly useless unless your opponent plays into your hand. I'm going to give this card a D and avoid playing it in most scenarios. Next, we have Wretched Camel, which for 1 generic and 1 black is a 2/1 zombie camel. And it has, when Wretched Camel dies, if you control a desert, or there's a desert in your graveyard, target player discards a card. Another one of these cards with the desert payoff, Zombie Camel, is probably only going to be playable in decks with tons of zombie payoffs, since it's a zombie, or in decks that have a decent number of deserts. A 2 mana 2/1 that doesn't do anything else just doesn't cut it these days. But if you can make sure you are making your opponent discard a card a decent amount of the time, which basically makes the camel into a 2-for-1, that's pretty nice. In a deck with 0 zombies and 0 deserts, this is barely playable. I'd say a D-, but if you have either of the other 2 things going on, it moves into the C- range. Well, that's the last black card in Hour of Devastation. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button. If you disagree with any of my grades, let me know in the comments. Discussing these things will be best for preparing us all for this new format. Also, if you want to make sure you catch the rest of this limited review and more Magic content from me, don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow I'll be back with my grades for all the red cards in Hour of Devastation. Also, starting with Hour of Devastation, I have teamed up with 5colorcombo.com to improve their drafting app. My card ratings are now used to help determine when the AI should select the cards, so the app has become much more realistic in terms of draft, so it is a great way to prepare for the format. Go check it out at 5colorcombo.com. You can find a link in the description below.